Leave this neighborhood right now. That's what our HOA president shrieked at my wife as if unloading moving boxes was a criminal act. You heard that right. Patricia actually called the police on us for daring to move into a home we legally owned. She claimed we were suspicious military types and a threat to the community, insisting the officers arrest us on the spot. This woman genuinely believed she had uncovered some massive criminal operation. She was practically giddy, pacing with anticipation, convinced our deep, dark secrets were about to come to light. But then my wife handed over her driver's license. And then her second form of ID. That's when Patricia's smug little grin froze. She didn't see what was coming. Let me rewind and explain how we got to this point, because this was supposed to be the best day of our lives, moving into the home we'd always dreamed of. A fresh start. Rebecca and I had spent months searching for the right place, and when we discovered this stunning two-story colonial with a white picket fence and picture-perfect lawn in Maplewood Estates, we knew we'd found it. The whole neighborhood looked like it belonged in a catalog of tree-lined streets, flawless sidewalks, and houses that radiated suburban charm. What we didn't know was that one neighbor in particular, Patricia Williams, would turn our little slice of heaven into something straight out of a psychological thriller. I'm Alex, by the way. I work from home as a graphic designer. My wife, Rebecca. Well, let's just say her past career would become quite relevant soon, and not in a way Patricia was ready for. We hadn't even finished parking the moving truck when she appeared like a bad omen summoned by the scent of cardboard. She looked exactly how you'd imagine a textbook HOA tyrant might, perfectly styled blonde bob, tennis outfit, and that unsettling combination of a fake smile and lifeless eyes that says, "I live for conflict." Clipboard in hand, she marched up to our porch like she owned the property. "Hello there," she said in a syrupy sweet voice that instantly made my skin crawl. "I don't think we've met. I'm Patricia Williams, president of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association." She announced her title like she was royalty. Rebecca paused her conversation with the movers and gave a polite nod. "Nice to meet you. I'm Rebecca, and this is my husband, Alex." But Patricia wasn't here to exchange pleasantries. "This is a family community," she continued, eyeing our boxes like a customs officer at the border. "Mind telling me a bit about yourselves? Where are you from? What do you do for a living?" Her questions came one after another, rapid fire. I could feel my jaw clenching. Who did this woman think she was, interrogating us on our own front porch? But Rebecca stayed calm, completely unbothered. "We're from Denver," she said smoothly. "Alex is a graphic designer, and I just left my previous position." Patricia's smile twitched. She latched onto that last part like a bloodhound catching a scent. "Oh, and what sort of work did you used to do?" There was a tone in her voice I didn't like, accusatory, suspicious, like she was already drawing conclusions. Rebecca gave a mild smile. "Government work." And just like that, she turned her attention back to the movers. But Patricia wasn't finished. "Well," Patricia said, flipping open her clipboard with dramatic flair, "we're going to need to see your documentation, HOA approval forms, background information, employment verification." I blinked at her in disbelief. "Are you serious?" I asked. "We bought this house. We don't need your permission to live here." Her grin widened, but there was no warmth behind it. "Oh, but you do," she cooed. "Everyone moving into Maplewood Estates must be reviewed and approved by the board. That includes full character references and documentation from your previous neighborhood." She spoke like she was reciting scripture. Rebecca gently put down the box she was carrying and looked her in the eye. "Is that so?" There was something in Rebecca's voice, low, calm, but I recognized the shift. Patricia clearly didn't. The rest of the day played out like a passive-aggressive circus. Patricia planted herself across the street in a lawn chair, binoculars in hand, monitoring the situation. Every half hour she came back with a new complaint. Our truck was parked wrong. We were too loud. Our parking permit wasn't placed correctly. Each complaint came with the same venomous smile. I was ready to snap. "But Rebecca?" She just nodded and replied, "We'll take care of it." By the time evening rolled around, Patricia had issued 7 formal violations and promised that official notices would be sent by mail. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with a smirk that made me want to scream. Once she finally stormed off, I lost it. What the hell was that? Who does she think she is, We need to file a complaint." Rebecca was calmly unpacking our home security system as something I don't recall her prioritizing at our old place. "Let her make the first real mistake," she said coolly. Her tone sent a chill down my spine. I'd never heard her speak like that before. "Mistake? She's made plenty today." Rebecca didn't look up. She was already installing cameras. "No," she said. "She's laying down a pattern." "And patterns? They're useful." I didn't know what she meant. Not yet, but I was about to learn that my wife was playing a game Patricia didn't even know she'd signed up for. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The whole interaction kept replaying in my head. Just after midnight, I went to grab a glass of water and happened to glance at one of the monitors Rebecca had set up. What I saw turned my blood to ice. Patricia, in our yard, crouched by our door, trying the handle. She was snapping photos through our windows, moving methodically. Like this wasn't her first time. She moved like she knew exactly what she was doing, checking every angle, snapping photos through our windows, even testing the door handle. I was about to charge outside when Rebecca's hand landed on my shoulder. "Don't," she said softly, "let me deal with this." I turned to face her, and in that moment, something shifted. In 5 years of marriage, I had never seen that look in her eyes, a calm, calculating, a broken bar, and genuinely unnerving. "She's not just unhinged," Rebecca said in a low voice. "She's organized, strategic. I've encountered her type before." The next morning, I watched Rebecca sit down with the security footage, studying every second with laser focus. I'd seen her this concentrated before, usually when she was deep into a high-stakes work project, but this was different. She was analyzing Patricia's behavior like it was military intel. When I asked her what she was doing, she simply pointed toward a box we hadn't unpacked yet. Sitting on top was a framed certificate I'd seen a dozen times but never gave much thought to. "A military commendation, from your army days?" I asked. Rebecca nodded once, not looking up. "Patricia has no idea who she's dealing with," she said flatly. "And that's her biggest mistake." I wanted to press her for more, but something in her face made it clear. This conversation was over. All I could do was watch and realize that Patricia Williams had chosen the absolute wrong person to go to war with. What Rebecca didn't tell me that day was what she planned to do about Patricia, and as I'd soon learn, her military background wasn't just a footnote, it was about to become Patricia's worst nightmare. If you think that first day was rough, trust me, Patricia was only getting started. Within 48 hours, the violations began arriving. Neatly formatted letters printed on official whole letterhead filled our mailbox, each one documenting a new infraction. Our lawn was apparently half an inch too tall. Our mailbox, painted the incorrect shade of black. Rebecca's car, parked slightly off-center in our own driveway. Every notice came with a $25 fine and a 2-week compliance deadline. By the end of the week, the total hit over $300 for nonsense so petty, it bordered on satire. "This is harassment," I told Rebecca, holding the latest stack of letters. "We can't just let this slide." But she didn't flinch. She placed the papers into a folder labeled evidence and kept tracking every move. Patricia Madia photos, timestamps, violation logs, everything. It was becoming clear that Rebecca was playing a long game. I just didn't know the rules yet. Things escalated on Monday, when Patricia decided to make her campaign against us public. I was in my office when I heard shouting outside. Peeking out the window, I saw Patricia at our mailbox, waving papers in Rebecca's face like she was announcing a guilty verdict in front of a jury. "I run this neighborhood," she screamed loud enough to wake the dead. "You'll follow our rules or you can pack up and go. This is a respectable community. We don't tolerate rule breakers." Rebecca stood there silently, arms crossed, showing no reaction. By now, neighbors had started to gather on their porches, drawn by the spectacle. Patricia noticed and began playing to the crowd. "Some people think they can just waltz in here and ignore our standards," she bellowed, putting on a performance for her audience. "Well, I've got news for them. This is my neighborhood." That's when I lost it. I stormed outside, ready to shut her down, but Rebecca caught me by the arm just in time. "Let her dig her own grave," she said in a calm, firm whisper. Something about her tone made me stop cold. Patricia turned her attention toward me, grinning like a shark spotting a wounded swimmer. "Oh look, the husband," She sneered to the crowd. "Maybe you can talk some sense into your wife. She seems to think the rules don't apply to her." The way she emphasized "your wife" made it sound like a slur. I opened my mouth, ready to unleash, but Rebecca tightened her grip just slightly enough for me to know, not yet. So I stayed quiet, and watched Patricia publicly bury herself, word by toxic word. It wasn't until later that I realized what I had witnessed, Rebecca letting Patricia do all the damage to herself without lifting a finger. But Patricia wasn't finished. She kicked things into overdrive with a full-blown smear campaign. I watched from inside as she went door to door with her clipboard, gossiping under the guise of concern. She spent a good half hour at each home, likely spinning wild tales about the new, mysterious couple who were supposedly a threat to the neighborhood. She zeroed in on vulnerable targets: elderly residents, families with small children, people more likely to fear the unknown. And within days, the shift was noticeable. Neighbors who had once waved started crossing the street to avoid us. Mrs. Henderson, who had baked us cookies on move-in day, suddenly seemed in a perpetual rush to get indoors. The family across the road installed a fresh set of security cameras oddly angled directly at our house. Patricia's grand finale: she launched a neighborhood watch group. We all received the email. Due to recent security concerns, the Maplewood Estates HOA will be establishing a broken bar, enhanced monitoring protocols. That's what the email said. Residents were encouraged to report any suspicious activity, unusual visitors, or violations of community standards. Patricia held the first neighborhood watch meeting right in her living room. I counted 15 people through her window. 15. She'd officially cast herself as Maplewood Estates Guardiana, its self-appointed saviora, and we were now the dangerous element she was valiantly protecting the neighborhood from. It was genius in the most deranged way possible. She wasn't just harassing us anymore. She was painting herself as the hero of some suburban thriller, and we were the villains. Within a week, her surveillance turned into outright stalking. She followed us to the grocery store, snapping pictures of our license plates and jotting down notes. She parked outside our house for hours in her car, watching, recording. When Rebecca went jogging, Patricia trailed behind in her SUV like a low-rent private investigator. It was absurd, but she always framed it as concern for neighborhood safety. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. Every creak, every rustle outside had me on edge. My nerves were frayed. But Rebecca? She stayed focused, calm, always watching, always documenting every violation, every encounter, like she was preparing for trial. "We need to do something," I said one night, pointing to Patricia, who had just unfolded a lawn chair across the street, settling in for her nightly watch like she was on patrol. "This is insane." Rebecca didn't even look up. She was organizing her file as timestamps, photos, videos, notes, all categorized, all in order. "She's building a case against herself," Rebecca said evenly. "Harassment, stalking, intimidation, abuse of authority. Every day, she adds more to the record." Her voice was so matter-of-fact it stopped me cold. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't angry, she wasn't scared, she looked at the broken bar satisfied, like everything was unfolding exactly as planned. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. Rebecca finally glanced up and gave me a small smiley, not the warm one I'd come to know over the years. This one was colder, sharper, calculated. "Patience, Alex," she said. "She's about to make the mistake I've been waiting for." Right on cue, my phone buzzed an unknown number. I didn't even have time to answer before I heard Patricia's voice echoing from across the street. She was on her porch, talking loudly into her phone with the exaggerated urgency of someone giving a performance. "Yes, I need to report something," she said. "My neighbors are there threatening me. They have military training and weapons. I'm genuinely scared for my life, and for the safety of our community." I froze. She continued her rant, layering on accusations like she was reading from a script. "They've been taking pictures, intimidating residents, violating all kinds of rules. A broken bar, please. Send officers immediately. This situation is escalating fast." She ended the call and turned her gaze directly at our house, and smiled. But instead of panicking, Rebecca calmly stood up. She walked to the front closet and retrieved her purse, a simple black leather one I'd seen her carry 1,000 times. She opened it, checked something inside, then zipped it closed with practiced care. "Perfect," she murmured. And for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely a broken bar pleased. It's time. I blinked at her. Time for what? She turned to me, that same unnerving smile still on her face. Time to show Patricia Williams exactly who she's been messing with. What's in Rebecca's purse that has her so confident? And why is she actually glad the police are coming? You're about to find out why you never underestimate someone with a background you don't understand. The sound of sirens shattered the quiet of our street, flashing lights reflecting off every window like we were suddenly in the middle of a true crime documentary. 2 patrol cars pulled up, creating an instant spectacle. Neighbors gathered on porches and sidewalks, drawn like moths to the chaos. And right on cue, Patricia emerged from her front door. Tears streamed down her cheeks. One hand clutched dramatically at her chest. She was in full victim mode. "Thank God you're here," she cried, her voice loud enough for the entire block. "I've been so scared. They've been stalking me, taking photos of my home, threatening me and my family." She pointed at us like she was identifying fugitives. The trembling hand, the wavering voice. It was an award-worthy performance. And the worst part? People believed her. I could see it on their faces. Officer Johnson, a tall man in his 40s with a calm but serious demeanor, walked up our porch with his partner, while Patricia kept the dramatics going behind them. "Evening, folks," he said. Officer Johnson spoke in that calm, measured cop voice that somehow made me more nervous, even though we'd done absolutely nothing wrong. "We received a call about a disturbance," he said. "Mind if we have a word?" I opened my mouth, ready to explain that our neighbor was unhinged, but Rebecca stepped forward first with the same calm, collected presence she'd maintained all week. "Of course, officer," she said politely, "though I should mention everything Mrs. Williams reported has actually been happening the other way around. We've been documenting it extensively, if you'd like to see the evidence." The way she said extensively was a quiet warning, and if Patricia had been paying attention, she might have realized she'd just made a very serious mistake. "She's lying," Patricia shrieked from across the lawn, her mask of composure completely shattered. "She's been stalking me, taking photos through my windows. She has military-grade weapons in that house. I'm terrified for my life." She was going all in now, ramping up the hysteria, likely noticing that the officers weren't immediately slapping cuffs on us. "They don't respect our community. They're dangerous people who don't belong here." Officer Johnson's partner was scribbling in a notebook while the neighborhood gathered to watch the unfolding drama like it was primetime television. Patricia had turned our quiet street into a one-woman circus and she was the ringmaster. But what she didn't know was that Rebecca had been preparing for this exact moment. "Ma'am," Officer Johnson said, addressing both of us but clearly directing his focus to Rebecca, "we'll need to confirm everyone's identity. Can I see some ID from you both?" This was Patricia's big moment, the climax of her twisted fantasy. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, fully expecting the police to uncover whatever criminal conspiracy she'd invented in her head. "Yes," she called out eagerly. "Please check their records. I bet they have criminal backgrounds. I bet they're not even who they say they are." I fumbled for my wallet, nerves making my hands shake, but Rebecca moved with complete composure, like she'd rehearsed this scene 100 times. She handed over her driver's license, first a standard Colorado ID showing our old Denver address. Officer Johnson gave it a quick glance and nodded, then waited. That's when Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a second card. She held it out with the same deliberate grace she'd shown all night. "You'll want to see this too," she said. Officer Johnson took the card and everything changed. His demeanor shifted in an instant. The polite skepticism was gone, replaced by something sharper. "Military ID," he said aloud, making sure Patricia could hear. "United States Army, military police investigator." He looked up at Rebecca again, but now with a newfound respect, the kind you can't fake. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Patricia's face transformed right in front of us. All the smugness, all the righteous fury gone. Her jaw dropped open. The blood drained from her face like she'd been slapped with reality. She'd spent weeks harassing, stalking, and publicly accusing a decorated veteran, a former military police investigator. She hadn't just made a mistake, she detonated her own credibility. "Ma'am," Officer Johnson said, his voice firmer now, "you served in military police?" Rebecca nodded calmly. "Recently discharged," she said. Specialized in harassment, stalking, and abuse of authority investigations. Each word landed like a hammer. Not just her resume, she was describing exactly what Patricia had done to us. Officer Johnson's partner looked over at Patricia, who was now frozen, mouth still open, completely stunned. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "you just filed a false report against a decorated service member." Patricia tried to recover, stammering excuses. "Yeah, I didn't know a broken bar. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. A broken bar." But no one was buying it. And every neighbor who'd come out to witness her grand accusation had just seen her unravel in real time. The woman who claimed to be the community's protector had just exposed herself as its biggest problem. "I didn't know," Patricia whispered, eyes darting. "I was just trying to—" Officer Johnson didn't let her finish. "Ma'am," he said sternly, "filing a false police report is a serious offense. Making false accusations against a U.S. military veteran is even more serious." His tone made it clear, Patricia Williams was no longer in control of this story. The game had blown up in Patricia's fascia and the aftermath was dead silent. Just minutes earlier, she'd had the crowd eating out of her hand. Now, those same neighbors stared at her with open shock and quiet revulsion. Mrs. Henderson shook her head slowly. Disappointment etched across her face. The young couple from down the street whispered behind their hands and avoided Patricia's gaze. Even the folks who had once eagerly nodded along with her complaints now looked like they wanted nothing to do with her. In under a minute, Patricia had gone from self-appointed community watchdog to full-blown neighborhood disgrace, and by the look on her face, she was starting to grasp just how badly she'd miscalculated. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Not even close. Officer Johnson turned back to her, a new note of respect in his voice. "Ma'am," he said, "would you like to press charges for harassment, stalking, and filing a false report?" Rebecca looked directly at Patricia, who was visibly shaking now. Then she smiled, a small, composed smile that didn't reach her eyes. She paused, drawing out the silence as everyone held their breath. And then she said something that took everyone by surprise. "Actually, Officer Johnson," she said calmly, "I have a better idea." From her purse, Rebecca pulled out a business card, one I'd never seen before, and handed it over. "I'd like this incident officially documented. But I won't be pressing charges tonight." "Sometimes," she added, "people make poor decisions when they don't have all the facts." Her tone was polite, measured, but there was a steel edge to it that made it clear this wasn't mercy. This was strategy. The officer looked down at the card. It was heavy cardstock, crisp, clean, and professionally embossed. Rebecca Mitchell, Military Police Investigation Division A Financial Crimes Unit. Officer Johnson raised an eyebrow. "You specialized in financial crimes?" Rebecca nodded. "White-collar offenses, fraud, embezzlement, abuse of authority. I've worked everything from petty theft to full-blown corruption cases." Her eyes flicked over to Patricia, who still hadn't moved. "In my experience," Rebecca continued, "people who show this level of obsessive, territorial behavior, particularly those who control local funds, are often compensating for something else. It's usually worth looking deeper." Officer Johnson glanced at the card again, brows furrowing as he made the connection. "Military Police Investigation Division," he repeated quietly. "You weren't just a beat cop." "No," Rebecca said. "I handled the kinds of cases where harassment is just the tip of the iceberg." Everyone heard her, including Patricia. "And I suddenly understood. Rebecca hadn't spared her out of kindness. She was letting Patricia hang herself there with enough rope to make it permanent." Rebecca had been building a case from the day we moved in. Tonight wasn't the end. It was the beginning. When Officer Johnson closed his notebook without arresting anyone, Patricia looked almost relieved, like she'd narrowly escaped disaster. As the officers left and neighbors began to drift away, she tried to recover what was left of her dignity. "Well," she said to the dwindling crowd, forcing a shaky smile, "I hope this reminds everyone how important it is to stay vigilant in our community." But no one responded. Even her most loyal followers couldn't meet her eyes. Mrs. Henderson stopped right in front of her. "You should be ashamed," she said flatly before walking away without another word. The cracks were spreading faster and Patricia knew it. Back inside, I followed Rebecca into the house. Still stunned, I closed the door behind me and stared at her. "What the hell was that?" I asked. You could have had her arrested. Why let her walk? Rebecca was already seated at her computer, typing quickly, bringing up documents I vaguely remembered seeing her working on over the past 2 weeks. Because, she said without looking up, harassment and false reporting are small potatoes, Alex. She clicked through a folder, then turned the screen toward me. I've been investigating Patricia Williams since day 2, and what I found is a lot bigger than a nasty neighbor with control issues. I leaned in to look, my mouth fell open. On the screen were financial records, scanned property documents, home meeting minutes, emails from city officials, an entire digital dossier, organized and cross-referenced. 3 years of HOA financial statements, city permits, internal correspondence. Rebecca hadn't just matched Patricia, she'd outclassed her completely, and something told me Patricia's problems were only just beginning. Rebecca's screen was filled with an avalanche of files, neighborhood project logs, contractor licenses, permits, even property tax records for every house in Maplewood Estates. I scrolled through them, stunned. Where did you get all this? She gave me that cold, precise smile I was starting to recognize, a not cruel, but calculated. Military police training, Alex. When someone shows you who they are, you verify thoroughly. She began clicking through highlighted documents, sections that made my stomach twist. Patricia's been running this hole like her own private fiefdom for the past 3 years, she said. Unauthorized fines, intimidating dissenters, enforcing rules selectively. But the real story is in the money. She opened a spreadsheet with 2 years of HOA financials, income, expenditures, budget allocations. It was a masterclass in creative accounting. Take a look, she said, pointing to several line items. $15,000 billed for resurfacing the pool last summer, but the pool was already resurfaced a year and a half ago, and it's still pristine. She scrolled down. $22,000 for tree removal and replanting. I've walked this entire neighborhood. There hasn't been a single tree touched in the last year. The deeper we looked, the uglier it got. Dozens of suspicious transactions, payments to non-existent contractors, equipment purchases for facilities we didn't even have, maintenance and landscaping charges with no visible results. Patricia hadn't just abused her power, she had been stealing from everyone, masked behind the HOA's authority. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, a soft knock echoed from the back door. Rebecca and I exchanged a glance. It was nearly 10 p.m.a. Definitely not a time for social calls. She pulled up our security monitor. Her expression shifted into something unreadable. It's Mike Williams, she said. Patricia's husband. I'd seen him around, a quiet, jittery, always 2 steps behind her. He looked like a man who had spent years trying not to be noticed. Rebecca opened the door. Mike all but stumbled into the kitchen, glancing nervously over his shoulder like he expected Patricia to come storming in after him. I need to talk to you, he said in a whisper. About my wife. She's not who you think she is. He looked wrecked, his shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes haunted, like someone who had aged 10 years in a single evening. She's been drinking since the police left, he said, voice low and shaky, ranting about how you humiliated her, swearing she's going to make you pay. But then she started talking about getting rid of evidence, destroying documents, cleaning up loose ends. His hands trembled as he spoke. That's when I can't protect her anymore. What she's doing, it's not just unethical, it's criminal. He sank into a chair, sweat on his forehead despite the cool air. I've seen what she's done to you, the violations, the police. Tonight was the last straw. Then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. She's been embezzling HOA funds, he said quietly, for years, faking repairs, logging expenses for work that never happened. I'm an accountant, I do the books. She made me help cover it up. Rebecca leaned forward, already opening the envelope with calm, professional precision. She said if I didn't play along, she'd leave me, take everything, destroy me. But I can't do it anymore. Inside were copies of bank statements, fake invoices, email threads with shady contractors, payments for services never rendered, receipts for projects that didn't exist. Rebecca examined each page carefully. How much are we talking? She asked, not looking up. Mike's voice was barely a whisper. 50,000, maybe more. Over the past 3 years, landscaping, pool work, security upgrades. All fake. Then she has me route the money into personal accounts she controls. Rebecca finally looked up. Her expression made me deeply thankful I wasn't on the receiving end of it. Mike, she said gently but firmly, what you're describing isn't just home mismanagement, a broken bar. This isn't just mismanagement, Rebecca said, her voice low and steady. This is organized fraud, systematic theft. The words hit me like a freight train. Patricia hadn't been targeting us out of petty spite. She was running a full-blown criminal operation. We were a threat to her control, to her scheme. It all made sense now. She saw us for what we were, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. A danger to everything she's been hiding. Rebecca nodded. A military police investigator moves into her neighborhood as someone trained to spot fraud, inconsistencies, abuse of authority. It's the last thing she could afford. Mike was nodding vigorously. That's exactly it. As soon as she found out about you two, she started ranting about how people like you ask too many questions. She wanted to get rid of you before you could dig too deep. Rebecca methodically sorted the contents of the envelope, photographing each page with clinical precision. It was like watching a case file being built in real time. When she finished, she looked up at Mike. Mike, she said, her tone turning more serious, you need to understand what you've just handed me. This isn't just HOA corruption, it's evidence of federal crimes, mail fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, theft of community funds. Patricia won't just lose her position, she could be facing prison. Mike went pale but didn't flinch. I know, he whispered. I've been carrying this guilt for 3 years. I should have stopped her, but I was afraid. Tonight, seeing her go after innocent people to protect her lies, I knew I couldn't keep enabling her. As he stood to leave, Rebecca walked him to the door, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, she said, and you won't face this alone. I've worked these cases before. When you come forward voluntarily, especially with this kind of documentation, you're treated very differently from the ones orchestrating the crime. After Mike left, Rebecca immediately returned to her computer and began integrating his evidence with her files. Alex, she said without looking up, tomorrow, Patricia Williams is going to realize that harassing us was the worst mistake of her life. That cold, satisfied smile spread across her face again. I felt a chill of anticipation. Justice was coming and Patricia had no idea. The next day, Patricia sent out an urgent HOA email, summoning all residents to an emergency meeting at 7 p.m. The subject line alone made her intentions clear. Critical community safety update. All residents are strongly encouraged to attend. The message read, as we address the removal of disruptive individuals who pose a threat to Maplewood Estate's security and standards. It was her last stand, a desperate attempt to frame us as the villains, to protect the crumbling illusion of control she built around herself. She was rallying her base, but what she didn't know was that Rebecca had spent the entire day preparing a counter-strike. She'd built a bulletproof presentation backed by evidence, and Mike had agreed to attend ready to testify. Rebecca had also made calls to former colleagues from her military police days to double-check legal protocols and ensure the evidence was airtight. She'd even spoken with Officer Johnson, who confirmed he'd be on standby. If what you're showing me checks out, he told her, she's looking at serious federal charges. His voice was calm, confident. And Rebecca? She wasn't just ready, she was methodical, focused. This wasn't going to be a heated neighborhood dispute. This was going to be a takedown. That evening, the community center was packed. Nearly every one of the 50 homes in Maplewood Estates was represented. Patricia had set the stage like she was hosting a political rally. A microphone, podium, projector screen, even HOA-branded banners flanking the stage. She was clearly aiming for legitimacy, hoping to drown us in pageantry and perception. As people filed in, Patricia worked the room like a seasoned campaigner, shaking hands, accepting compliments, projecting control. But not everyone was buying it. I noticed Mrs. Henderson sitting in the back, eyes downcast. The young couple from 3 doors down whispered quietly to each other, avoiding Patricia altogether. Last night's events had planted seeds of doubt. Tension buzzed in the air like static before a storm. Patricia had arranged the seating so her loyalists were front and center. creating a wall of support between her and the rest of the neighborhood. Her opening slide glowed behind her, maintaining community standards, a crisis response. The title alone made her intentions clear. She was preparing to put on a show. What she didn't realize was that the real performance hadn't started yet. Patricia had gone all out. She stood confidently at the front of the room, flanked by charts, graphs, and a glossy slideshow that screamed authority. Several residents clutched printed copies of her so-called talking points, proof that she'd spent the entire day rallying support and crafting her narrative. But despite all the preparation, I noticed something off in her posture, a nervous energy she couldn't quite mask. Her gestures were sharp, too rehearsed, her smile just a little too tight. She wasn't leading from strength. She was scrambling to stay ahead of something she couldn't control. "Welcome, everyone," Patricia began, her voice firm and polished, honed over 3 years of unchallenged rule. "Tonight, we come together to address a serious threat to our peaceful community." Her words echoed across the room with manufactured conviction. "For the past 2 weeks, we've witnessed escalating intimidation, harassment, and blatant disregard for our neighborhood standards. Certain individuals have moved into our community and immediately begun to disrupt our way of life." She was painting herself as Maplewood Estates' last line of defense, a champion of suburban values under siege by dangerous outsiders. The applause from her loyalists was enthusiastic but not unanimous. I caught sight of crossed arms, skeptical expressions, residents not fully convinced by the act. Patricia pressed on, her voice adopting a mock authoritative tone as she paraded evidence. Photographs of violations, cherry-picked testimonials from supportive neighbors, and ominous statistics showing declining property values in communities with lax standards. She even quoted HOA bylaws and cited legal precedents for the removal of disruptive elements. "Some people," she continued, eyeing us with thinly veiled contempt, "move into established communities and immediately demand special treatment. But here in Maplewood Estates, everyone follows the same rules, no exceptions." It was all theatrics, her voice shifting between faux sympathy and rigid discipline, each slide more manipulative than the last. Violation notices, screenshots, highlighted passages from HOA guidelines. She built a narrative meant to make us look like invaders threatening everyone's home values and peace of mind. Then came the climax. Patricia unveiled her solution, a formal vote to begin removal proceedings against us. She claimed 27 of the neighborhood's 50 households had already signed a petition. "I never wanted to take this route," she said, her voice heavy with false regret. "But leadership sometimes means making difficult choices. We cannot let our neighborhood become a place where intimidation is rewarded, where military experience is twisted into a weapon against law-abiding families." The framing was masterful. She cast herself as the reluctant guardian, forced into action by our supposed aggression. A few residents nodded, visibly swayed by her story. That's when Rebecca stood. She'd been silent the entire time, calmly taking notes in a small leather notebook. Now, she closed it with a soft snap and rose to her feet. "May I respond to these allegations?" she asked evenly, her voice clear and steady, no microphone needed. Patricia faltered. She clearly hadn't expected a challenge, let alone a poised, composed one. "You Broken Bar residents can speak during the comment period," she said, trying to hold her ground. But Rebecca was already walking forward, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder and a thick file folder in hand. She smiled politely. "Thank you. I have some information that I believe the community deserves to see." The shift in the room was immediate. Gone was the passive audience. All eyes tracked Rebecca as she moved with calm, practiced precision. She opened her laptop, connected it to Patricia's projector system with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before, and brought up the first slide. The title alone sent a ripple through the room. Financial Audit, Maplewood Estates, prepared by Rebecca Mitchell, former military police financial crimes investigator. Gasps, audible ones. Patricia's face drained of color, her hands trembled slightly. She opened her mouth to speak but nothing came out. "Wait," she stammered. "That's it." But it was too late. Rebecca had the room, and this time, the truth was about to speak for itself. "You can't just..." Patricia sputtered, but it was too late. Rebecca had already advanced to her first slide, a 3-year breakdown of the HOA's income and expenses, with multiple discrepancies highlighted in bold, angry red. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca said, her voice calm and authoritative, like someone presenting in a courtroom, "I've conducted a detailed review of your HOA's financial records and what I've found is deeply troubling." She clicked to the next slide. One by one, the numbers told a story of deceit. $50,000 paid to contractors for work never completed, charges for maintenance equipment that didn't exist, landscaping bills for improvements that were never made. Every claim was backed by evidence via bank statements, canceled checks, internal emails, and forged receipts. Rebecca's presentation was methodical, meticulous, and devastating. "For the past 3 years," she said, her voice steady, "your HOA president has been siphoning money from every single household in this community." Gasps rippled through the crowd. What you were told were essential maintenance expenses were, in reality, payments to accounts controlled directly by Patricia Williams. The room erupted. Residents shouted questions. Others turned to Patricia, eyes wide with shock and betrayal. But Rebecca wasn't done. "Mike Williams," she said, her voice rising above the noise. Patricia's husband stood up slowly from the back of the room, where he'd been sitting unnoticed. His hands trembled slightly as he carried a banker's box to the front. "She forced me to help her," he said into the microphone, voice cracking. "She threatened to divorce me and take everything if I didn't falsify the books. But I kept records. All of it." He opened the box. Inside were copies of fake invoices, doctored spreadsheets, and expense reports fabricated to conceal tens of thousands of dollars in theft. Patricia shot to her feet, her voice shrill and panicked. "This is a setup. He's lying. Those documents are fake." But no one was listening. The evidence was overwhelming. The mask had shattered. Phones came out. Residents called lawyers. Some whispered about the police. Others demanded her immediate resignation. The room descended into chaos and accusations. Outrage, disbelief centered on the woman who had ruled over them with fear and self-righteousness. That's when Officer Johnson stepped into the room. Rebecca had called him earlier, asking him to wait outside for her signal. "Patricia Williams," he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "You are under arrest for theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." 2 other officers moved in as he began reading her rights. Patricia's face had gone pale. As they cuffed her, she turned to Rebecca, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You can't do this to me." Rebecca met her glare with calm finality. "Yes, I can," she said. "And I just did." Justice always wins. The aftermath came quickly. The HOA voted unanimously to remove Patricia from all positions and began the process of recovering stolen funds. Mike Williams was granted immunity in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation. Over the next few days, residents who had once supported Patricia came to her house, many bearing homemade food and heartfelt apologies. Mrs. Henderson, teary-eyed, admitted she had been too afraid to speak up for years. A for sale sign appeared in front of Patricia's home within the week. By the end of the month, she and her mounting legal trouble had become someone else's problem. Rebecca and I sat on our front porch that afternoon, watching as movers carried the last of Patricia's belongings into a truck. "Do you feel good about how it ended?" I asked. Rebecca paused, eyes fixed on the empty house across the street. Then she nodded. "I feel complete," she said. Patricia had spent 3 years stealing from hard-working families, hiding behind rules and intimidation. She needed to face the consequences, and now she had. Maplewood Estates was finally at peace. And sometimes, the best way to deal with a bully a broken bar is to let them walk right into their own downfall. But what happened to Patricia after her arrest? And did the neighborhood truly find the peace it was promised? The ending will leave you so satisfied, you'll want to watch it again. Comment below if you loved that takedown. Subscribe to Anna Drama Nest for more horror stories, neighborhood showdowns, and justice served with a side of petty. Because hey, maybe we didn't learn much today. A broken bar. But wow, it was fun, wasn't it?